And I can't believe we're considering putting Wharton down here. This will be the most comprehensive ranking of the top 20 MBA programs that you're ever gonna find on the internet. I say that because this tier list is sort of a meta study, or really just an average, of the most reputable financial publications that are talking about business schools. And there were two really valuable takeaways from this project that we'll cover throughout the video. This list averages the rankings from Bloomberg, US News, Fortune, and Forbes. Then it takes a couple qualitative factors into account to give us a true tier list that ranks the top MBA programs. Quick plug for myself, if you're considering opening a Chase or American Express credit card, use the referral link in the description down below. You and I will both get a lot of free bonus points when you sign up. Thanks. All right, it looks like our tier list here just wants us to go in alphabetical ranking, so we can do that. First up, we have the Haas MBA program at UC Berkeley. And this one just makes the B tier category in our list. I'll show you the methodology a little bit later on, but it just falls in at the 10th ranked MBA program, which gives it a really solid B. This one was a straightforward 10th place because we had a pretty narrow range amongst our 4 financial publications in where they placed this school. Next up, we have one of our very heavy hitters. It was a pretty clear decision when looking at the 4 rankings that the Booth School of Business at the University of Chicago received, that it was going to be an elite tier MBA program, giving it an S ranking. And it may be worth mentioning with Booth that for anyone not super familiar with MBA programs in general, you could be a little bit surprised to see the University of Chicago this high on the list. I know that at least when I was an undergrad, the general perception that I had of people who attended the University of Chicago was that it was more geared towards the arts. But make no mistake, Booth is generally considered to be one of the best, if not the best, MBA programs on the entire planet. Next up, we have Tepper at Carnegie Mellon. And before I assign the score here, I want to make the distinction that C's and D's on this tier list are not necessarily what C's and D's are when you're like getting a grade on a paper. Since Tepper falls between the 15th to 20th MBA program average ranking, it gets a D on our list here. Doesn't mean it's a bad school, it's actually probably a great school, but you get the idea. Actually, now I'm wondering, where's Carnegie Mellon at? Ooh, Pittsburgh. Yeah, no wonder. So for Columbia Business School, you might be a little bit surprised here. Anyone familiar with Columbia as a Ivy League university, which it certainly is, would possibly suspect that their business school is one of the top ranked programs. And actually, for the purposes of our list, it came in just below necessary to get the S or A rank. So it's in there at the B category, which is sort of average when you're just comparing to the other top 20. Don't worry, Columbia fans, your school isn't the only Ivy League that didn't get an S or A rank, so I'm not trying to pick on you. Check out the rest of the list to see which other Ivy Leagues didn't quite make it up there. Cornell, to be honest with you, I personally don't know much about this program other than Andy Bernard went to undergrad there. Looking at the average rankings from, again, our top 4 financial publications that rank MBA programs, it gets a C. Tuck at Dartmouth is another great example of an Ivy League that that did not quite make the cut for what you may have expected from some of those very well-known East Coast prestigious schools. It gets a B tier on our list. Although I do appreciate the unique coloring of the logo here. It's like the only green on our lineup, and I think it looks really good. The MBA program at Duke, I wish would get an F. I don't know anything about the school other than it's at Duke and I hate the Blue Devils. What is the name of that school there? Can anyone translate that for me? I'm worried about getting demonetized or something on YouTube if I try to say that word out loud. It unfortunately gets a C on our list. It is what it is. Next up, we have the MBA program at Georgetown. And sticking to the ranking methodology used earlier, it actually doesn't make it into the top 20. But there were 2 universities that were really close to the top 20. And then we had a big gap to 23, 24, 25. So I wanted to sort of give honorable mention to number 21 and 22 and include them on our list. So this is 22 total programs, not exactly 20. Georgetown is getting an honorable mention, so we're gonna put it in at the D tier. The next heavy hitter, based on what you read on Twitter, at least what I see on my Twitter feed, you would expect would be at like the S++ rank above everything else. But actually, objectively, It doesn't quite get to the same level as Booth and what you'll see as the other S-tier ranked MBA program. Harvard's MBA program misses our very top tier here, actually because of the ranking it received from US News in the 2022 review of MBA programs. They put Harvard at number 5, so that averaged Harvard pretty well below the top 2 or 3 spots on our list, which gets it the A ranking. By the way, if you're at all curious about why US News ranked Harvard at the number 5 MBA program, I'm including links to all of the sources that I used for this project, so you can get all the little details from them. Kelley School of Business at Indiana University, I'm happy made an honorable mention on this list. Again, it's not actually in the top 20. This one came in at number 22 on our numeric ranking, but I'm giving it honorable mention here, partly because it was really close to those ranked, 17 through 20, but also because I had a handful of friends go here. They really love the place, and of course this is anecdotal, but what I hear from them is that the network is awesome. Graduates from Kelley are a really tight-knit group, and you can almost get anything done if you know the right people after attending this program. So we're giving it an honorable mention, and it does make the D tier on our list. It pains me terribly, maybe even more so than Duke. No, not more so than Duke, but it pains me to say that the Ross School of Business at the University of Michigan is a top 20 MBA program. Not only is it a top 20, it gets a C tier on our list, which means it's better than a handful of them that are also in the top 20. It's just a great place to study business, and it might be one of the most newly built and have some of the most impressive architecture and just nicest looking buildings out of many of the schools on this list, especially compared to the East Coast Ivy League schools. All of that stuff was built in like 1850 and doesn't look all that impressive. Ross is a really nice place. The Sloan School of Management at MIT, to be honest, I didn't realize was such a highly rated MBA program before pursuing this exercise. Of course, MIT, the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, is globally renowned for the programs that it offers in technical fields, but the business school is apparently also very legit. Who knew? So it gets not quite the S or A tier rankings that some of the other Ivy Leagues would, but it's still a B and very high up on our overall list. UNC, North Carolina, I was really surprised to see getting mentioned so often when looking through those 4 financial publications that I talked about. I've always known that they had a great undergraduate finance program. I didn't know that at the graduate or MBA level, it was also very well renowned, and it made the top 20. It gets a D tier on our list. The Kellogg School of Business at Northwestern gets an A, actually. And I was kind of surprised, not necessarily that the Kellogg School of Business is a great program, but just how prestigious it was talked about amongst these financial publications that this list came from, comparing its prestige and its quality of education to all of the Ivy League business schools. So it falls in at an A on our tier list right there next to Harvard. I know a guy who did an MBA at Northwestern. Maybe I should respect him a little bit more than I already do. I'm just kidding. I do not measure people based on their level of education. Stern at NYU fell very easily at the number 12 spot, gives it a C tier for the purposes of our list here. There was also a very narrow range for this school. Everyone had them somewhere between 10 and 14, I think. So that made it an easy C for our list. With this next one, Stanford Business School, I'm gonna give a little bit of a spoiler here. I was very surprised to see how prestigious Stanford Business School actually is. And maybe I shouldn't be. Whenever I'm talking to people about my own kids and what college I might want them to go to and how much money I need to save for college, I always say, well, I don't know if they're going to go to Stanford because then they'll need this much money, but if they go to a state school, I won't need quite as much saved up. Even though I'm half joking, I obviously revere Stanford's undergrad program to be very prestigious and of course expensive. Their MBA school came in at a pretty clear number 1. It gets an S tier. Maybe everyone watching this video is aware of that. I had no idea that it's up there with the likes of Booth, and you'll see near the end of this list when we get to Wharton, because this is alphabetical, that Stanford beats it, and I could not believe that. So way to go to the Stanford MBA program for being so highly respected. UCLA Business School, Anderson, fell in pretty easily within the top 20. There wasn't a lot of debate here, and if it matters to you, it actually got the highest diversity ranking amongst all the MBA programs. It's actually only Bloomberg did a diversity ranking of the student base, but UCLA scored well there, maybe not surprisingly. So it does fall in on our top 20 list, but nowhere near the prestige of, some of the Ivy Leagues or like Stanford. So it gets a D tier. And then, in my mind, at least very similarly, is USC. I don't know of all that much of a difference between the business schools at these two programs. Now, maybe the finance industry in Southern California will laugh at me and say, oh, you dumb Midwesterner. Of course, there are huge differences between USC and UCLA, but I'm not aware of them. So in my mind, they're kind of like the same thing. And they got a very similar ranking on our tier list. Important to note with the Texas logo we have here, this is actually UT Austin. McCombs is the business school at UT Austin, and it was not an honorable mention. It was well within the top 20. This was another one that I personally just didn't know was as prestigious as it is, and so it got a lot of love from our ranking agencies for its 2022 MBA school, and it makes it on our list. It's a D tier. Now, the University of Virginia's MBA program, Darden, was another big surprise to me. Now, it didn't quite make the top 10, so it's not considered a top 10 MBA program. So it falls in at the C tier on our list, but it was really close. And a couple of the publications, I think it was Bloomberg and Forbes, did actually put it within the top 10. Now, the other two had it a handful of spots below, so it averaged out below, but I didn't realize that in some eyes, this was a really prestigious MBA program. If you're a top 10, I mean, that's a huge deal. It's important to note, as we get to the last handful of names on this list, that this is the list of the best MBA programs as it relates to careers in finance. There are some other reasons to pursue an MBA other than trying to work in the field of finance. For example, you might need to Google the best MBA programs for supply chain management or something like that. But for the purposes of this channel, we're concerned about actually working in the investing field. And that's what the 4 financial publications we're looking at in their rankings. And my last side note before we finalize the list here, there is a very big perceived difference, at least in the United States, amongst having a top 10 MBA and all the rest. Now, I'd also say a top 20 is a category that some companies will look for. They know that there's a difference between 11 through 20 compared to 1 through 10, but being in a top 20 program is still relatively prestigious, I think because of the needed GMAT scores to get into any of the top 20. It shows that you're a very smart person. But still, and I'm talking about this because University of Virginia almost cracked in, or the MBA program there. Being in the top 10 is a really, really big deal. Saying that you have an MBA is one thing, and then saying you have a top 10 MBA is a totally different thing, especially in recruiting, especially in the more prestigious fields in finance like investment banking, private equity, hedge funds. To be honest, in those areas, any MBA degree outside of the top 10 programs is almost not worth anything. So if you're looking at that type of a career, the top 10 is a really important thing to shoot for. Okay, now Wharton, University of Pennsylvania, Wharton Business School, was the single biggest surprise to me in doing this project. It almost, and I can't believe we're considering putting Wharton down here, but it almost got a B tier ranking. Now it does get an A tier, so don't worry. All the Wharton lovers out there, or if you're like me and you always held Wharton as the #1 MBA program hands down that could possibly exist in the world, you're probably pretty surprised to see it getting a lower ranking than Booth and Stanford. For whatever reason, with all the financial media and TV shows, just talking with people, podcasts, anything that I have ever heard of, or just looking at the management teams at big investment companies, you'll see Wharton MBAs all over the place. I always felt like Wharton was hands down the best program there is. The big reason that it doesn't get an S tier here, though, is that Bloomberg ranked it as the #9 MBA program. All the others said it was 2 or 3, but Bloomberg gave it a 9. So that knocked it out of the top 2, which on this list would have been the S tier. The obvious next question is, why the heck did Bloomberg only give Wharton the #9 ranking? Actually, helpfully, Bloomberg breaks down what their categories were that they looked at. Wharton does very well in all the categories except for education. Bloomberg said that Wharton was like the 20th best MBA program at actually educating its students, which gave it an overall ranking at Bloomberg of 9, which gave it an overall ranking on our list of just 5, meaning it barely made it into the A tier here. If it was #6, I would have had it at a B. So you'll just have to read for yourself what Bloomberg says about the actual educating that happens at Wharton. For the reasons they mention, Bloomberg says you don't actually learn nearly that much doing the MBA program at Wharton compared to all the others in the top 20. And that was very surprising to me. Maybe they sort of think Wharton is just resting on its laurels of having the biggest brand name in the finance industry when it comes to MBAs. I don't know exactly why they say the things they do about it, but man, it knocks it out of the S tier and almost puts it in the B tier category. Last, alphabetically, but certainly not least, is Yale. Yale falls in at the B tier on our list, along with a couple of the other Ivy League schools there. Great MBA program, just not necessarily in the top 5. Earlier, I made a big deal about the top 10 programs, and One of the things that I felt that was very beneficial of doing this project is, even though we were looking at 4 different financial publications and their rankings, there was a very clear distinction between the top 10 and all the rest, meaning there was a pretty big gap. There were no universities or business schools that were borderline when it came to the top 10. There was like a 3-point gap from the top 10 to all the others. So I do believe that this list, and looking at the S, A, and B tiers, answers the question, what are the top 10 MBA programs? You can see them right here, the top 10 being the first 10 listed. There's not a lot of debate amongst the finance industry outside of these 10. And then further, if you wanted to get even more prestigious or egocentric, I might say, there's also a pretty clear distinction amongst the top 5. You can see after number 5, the scores take a pretty good drop. This does serve, in my opinion, as a really good metric. What are the top 5? There you go. What are the top 10? There you go. And the top 20, I gave the 2 honorable mentions because they're relatively close. Yeah, I think this was a really clear and straightforward answer to some of those questions. So I hope you found the video helpful. Please like it and subscribe if you haven't already. And let me know in the comments down below if you certainly want to see stuff like this in the future. As always, thanks for watching.